Shelagh Fogarty on LBC.
With Bupa Business, get fast access to health experts.
Now, Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky are, as we speak, speaking themselves together, according to the White House. It's the first time the two leaders have spoken since that pretty disastrous confrontation at the White House last month. Simon Marks is here to talk to us about it, LBC's Washington correspondent. A lot of water has flown under the bridge, since that White House fiasco. What can we expect from this conversation, Simon?
Well, to be a fly on the wall. I mean, we think it's still going on, Sheila. We learnt that they began the call 55 minutes ago. There has been no report from inside the White House yet to suggest that the call has come to an end. And certainly the two men have got an awful lot to discuss, even after they try and put the mugging of Zelensky by President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance in the Oval Office 2.5 weeks ago behind them. And they've got a lot to discuss, of course, because President Trump needs to brief Volodymyr Zelensky about his phone call yesterday with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. There are many observers here in Washington who find it extraordinary that he didn't call Zelensky immediately after his phone conversation with Vladimir Putin, but has waited fully 24 hours to give Zelensky a call and brief him about the outcome of that discussion. As you know, the White House is portraying the conversation between President Trump and President Putin as a diplomatic triumph for the American leader, but in reality, he did not extract any concessions from the Russians as far as any commitment to a 30-day full ceasefire is concerned. Only a possible agreement that the Russians will not attack energy infrastructure, although the Ukrainians say that they don't believe that that was honoured even last night. And also a commitment to examine the possibility of a maritime ceasefire. But there is no indication at all that Vladimir Putin is interested in the full ceasefire that Volodymyr Zelensky has committed to, because Putin is saying to the Americans, in order for it to take place, Ukraine essentially needs to be neutered. They must be getting no military assistance from anywhere, no intelligence sharing from anywhere. They must be stopped from repositioning troops, even from training troops during the course of that ceasefire. And even if the Americans were prepared to accept those terms, it's pretty clear that Volodymyr Zelensky and the European leaders, including our own Prime Minister, would not be willing to accept them, particularly the issue of intelligence sharing and suspending arms shipments to Ukraine. All of that would further damage Ukraine's prospects in the war. So, this could be potentially this phone conversation that's taking place today, and we won't know until we hear about it from both the American and the Ukrainian side. This has the potential again to be a bit of a fiery chat.
If it turns out that Trump's role here morphs into, or was always going to be, just about weakening Ukraine and strengthening Putin for the sake of his relationship with Putin, where does that leave us, I wonder? Because Donald Trump will be sensitive to accusations that he's being made a fool of by Putin. But, of course, if he's in on it, he's not being made a fool of, is he? If he's in on this plan to weaken Ukraine in this war, then it's precisely what he's working towards. It's hard to divine which it is.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the interview that Donald Trump gave to Fox News last night to their primetime presenter, Laura Ingraham, in which he kept coming back to the idea that once you can bring peace to Ukraine, there's a big economic upside for the United States in Russia. He keeps talking about developing economic partnership and geopolitical partnership between the United States and Russia. So that sort of undergirds the notion that Donald Trump is tilting the outcome of these peace negotiations in the Kremlin's direction. I don't think we will ever fully understand the nature of Donald Trump's relationship with the Russians and with Vladimir Putin particularly, but he's definitely got his eye on the money. He wants to get American business back into Russia. How you persuade American business to go back into Russia future is a whole other question. But he also wants to exploit Russia's rare earth minerals, and he wants Russia to have a piece of the American economy. He was very clear about that in the Fox News appearance last night. So that, again, only will worry European leaders who see in this Ukraine being basically excluded from a conversation in which the United States and Russia are determining the terms of any peace agreement, that it will then fall to European and potentially non-European peacekeepers to uphold without yet any commitment from Donald Trump for the backstop, the military security guarantees that the Prime Minister is demanding in exchange for British troops, for example, on the ground and in the air over Ukraine. So massive gaps here and a massive opportunity for Vladimir Putin to kind of force a wedge between the United States and Europe, and to do so at a time when, the opening for that wedge is already ajar, because Donald Trump has already made it very clear that he's not particularly interested in upholding the American side of the transatlantic bargain.
And if it's also about strengthening the Russia-US relationship economically and in other ways, is that also about pushing China further back a little?
Yeah, well, interestingly, he was asked about that in the Fox News interview, about the nature of the relationship between President Xi.
Look at me, Simon. What's happening? All Fox Newsy now.
All Fox Newsy all the time. But he was asked about the relationship between President Xi and President Putin. And in Donald Trump's world, I mean, he talks about he gets along really well with Vladimir Putin. He gets along really well with Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping wants a productive relationship, he says, with the United States. I mean, if you talk to officials who worked in the first Trump administration, they will tell you that throughout that time that they spent in Donald Trump's inner circle, it was absolutely clear that he views himself, he wants himself to be a major world figure like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. He covets their approach to life, the notion that you can carve up the world, an American sphere of influence that includes Canada as the 51st state, the stars and stripes on the sands of the Gaza Strip, take over the Panama Canal, get your hands on Greenland, a situation where China would have its own sphere of influence, although the United States would seek to contain that in the Asia-Pacific region, and Vladimir Putin being able to take chunks out of Ukraine. I mean, that's the kind of imperial presidency that this United States leader wants to pursue, and he wants to be seen as equals to Putin and Xi Jinping in the great power games globally.
It's going to be fascinating to see what comes out of it. Where do you think... I spoke to Bill Browder earlier on, a long-time critic and sort of a man who's warned the world about Putin for many years. And
Absolutely.
He felt that it was now almost inevitable, if I'm not misrepresenting him, that Europe would have to step up much more with Ukraine, because of all of the things you've just described and you and I have just been talking about, because the alternative is surrender, and Ukraine won't surrender.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, I would never disagree with Bill Browder on the worst of days. I mean, he's a remarkably perceptive analyst of the situation inside Russia, because, of course, he dealt with it personally in such searing times with Vladimir Putin. Look, there's no question that Europe's going to have to step up, because the United States, beyond Ukraine, wants to withdraw from Europe. I mean, Donald Trump has been absolutely clear about that. And so there are going to be huge challenges for Europe, for European governments, including making really difficult decisions now about how you ramp up defense production and what weaponry do you buy, because the United States is the European Union is so reliant on the United States for servicing armaments that they've already bought, for making armaments viable, because the United States operates the control systems of many of these weapons, that there are, of course, many analysts out there saying that Europe should not deepen its reliance on the American defense producing corporates, that it needs to find other sources for weaponry. And of course, that's also very difficult because the United States is so dominant in that field. So major questions, not just for our own government, but for governments across the European Union, for America's NATO partners, about what this transatlantic alliance is going to look like going forward, because it is absolutely clear now that it is not going to look anything like the transatlantic alliance that the world has known for the past 8 decades.
And can I ask you, just a final question, in relation to domestic policy and domestic, I suppose, his image in America, Trump's image in America, his popularity in America. There are some economic shocks already there, and there are some more to come, aren't there, to his story of making America great again. How is that a bit of a sort of juggernaut coming down the road, do you think, for him?
Yeah, I mean, it depends partly on whether he takes any steps to send messages of stability to the financial markets or not. So far, he has resisted all of that, indeed even saying on the aforementioned Fox News that he wasn't watching the markets when they were tanking a few days ago as a result of his on-again, off-again trade war. He says that April the 2nd is going to be Liberation Day for the United States when he goes full throttle with his tariffs. Every notable economist in the United States and internationally says he misunderstands the nature of tariffs, that they are inevitably going to lead to substantial price increases, to inflation, to supply shortages in the United States. He rejects that. He says that foreign companies are simply going to understand that they need to come in here and build manufacturing plants in the United States, and that Americans need to be ready for short-term pain. There's going to be a bump. It's a transition. The economy needs to detox itself off Joe Biden's commitment to public spending and instead witness this transition to the restoration of America as a manufacturing power. But this is all tied up, Sheila, with the sort of the growing cult of the Trump personality among his supporters here in the United States. An authoritarian, willing to defy court orders, even as he insists that's not what he's doing, absolutely pushing forward on a vast array of different channels at the same time. He's doing, it's a tsunami of stuff that takes place here every day. Some of it relating to the economy, other things, you know, shutting down institutions that have civil society, had civil society hallmarks for decades here. This is all a deliberate tsunami to knock everybody off their feet so that the courts, the media, his Democratic Party opponents, who have largely simply disappeared from view, cannot keep up with what's taking place here.
While we're speaking, Donald J. Trump has completed that call with President Zelensky. He says it lasted approximately 1 hour, a good telephone call, much of the discussion based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. We're very much on track. I will ask the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, to give an accurate description of the points discussed. That statement will be put out shortly. It was very Trumpian positivity there, isn't it?
Yeah, suggests they didn't have a huge blazing row, though, so I suppose there is that one can take from that. I mean, he keeps saying that the peace process is on track. We are very much on track, and I will ask the Secretary of State to give an accurate description of the points discussed. The interesting point in that statement is that he says he's seeking to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. Well, much of what he said over the last fortnight has been much more focused on Russia's requests and needs than Ukraine's. Let's see if he's made any progress bridging that divide.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Simon Marks, LBC's Washington correspondent. The time is 3:48.